Good morning. It is Thursday, March the 24th, and this is The Drill. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare, the Pledge of Allegiance, and the Star-Spangled Banner, we will have economic fascism, the unasked question, justice, non-provocative, promotion versus movement, no free lunch, and the bucket list actually from the unions, buckets number 2 and 3, direct contributions, and reward your friends. All that and more when I get back. Thank you. And now, the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare for March 24th. The enemy will flee at your rebuke. Just as I rebuked Satan and defended my servant Joshua, so too will I defend you, my child, and will cause the accusations of the enemy to be harmless to you. I have given you the power to speak to the enemy with rebuke, and you will see him flee from you. I have promised that those who rebuke the wicked will have delight, and a good blessing will come upon them. Follow my instruction and learn to do good. Seek justice, rebuke the oppressor, defend the fatherless, and plead for the widow. I will rebuke the devourer for your sake, so that he will not destroy the fruit of your ground, nor shall the vine fail to bear fruit for you in the field. Zechariah chapter 3, verses 1 through 2, Proverbs 24, verse 25, Malachi chapter 3, verse 11. Prayer declaration. Satan, the Lord rebukes you. Let the enemy flee at your rebuke, O Lord, because the Lord has strengthened me. I will rebuke Satan and cause him to cease from attacking my family and me. I will speak to the storm of my life and say, quiet, be still. Amen. And that was the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare for March the 24th. Thank you. Who is the true conservative? He is religious and realistic. He is the person that understands that culture is the foundation for politics. He acknowledges a benevolent universe. He is patriotic and uses common sense. He makes judgments, refuses to speculate, speaks clearly and definitively, and is not afraid to say no. He's open-minded, asking why rather than why not. He is consistent, credible, and influential, not ashamed of his existence, unafraid to learn or correct his mistakes. He is a normal American. Thank you, thank you. What are the tactics in support of the strategy to rid America of socialist influence? The long-term tactics are to be a true conservative, talk like a conservative, act like a conservative, dress like a conservative, and think like a conservative. The short-term tactics are rhetorical. True conservatives need to win all of the arguments. That means don't prove a negative. Don't take their word for it. Don't be neutral, and ask plenty of questions. Thank you, thank you. What is the true conservative strategy for defeating socialists in this country? Socialists must be driven from positions of power, and since it is lefty counterculture that provides the foundation for their political success, true conservatives must resist left-wing counterculture and promote normal American culture. By changing our culture, we will change our politics. And by changing the culture, we mean you need to get married, have a family, and raise your children. Thank you, thank you. What are the true conservative political priorities? Number 1, the abolition of abortion throughout the land. Number 2, make nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons obsolete. Number 3, the immediate decertification of all public employee unions. Number 4, the immediate assignment of criminal and civil liabilities to all government regulators. Number 5, the immediate repeal of the so-called Patriot Act. Number 6, the immediate repeal of all emergency dictator laws. Number 7, the reinstatement of writs of outlawry. Number 8, government-sponsored recalls, ballot initiatives, and referendums. 9, a flexible minimum wage. And 10, means-tested health care. Thank you, thank you. And now there's no free lunch. Quote, the recognition of the insuperable limits to his knowledge ought indeed to teach the student of society a lesson of humility which should guard him against becoming an accomplice in men's fatal striving to control society. A striving which makes him not only a tyrant over his fellows, but which may well make him the destroyer of a civilization which no brain has designed, but which has grown from the free efforts of millions of individuals. Unquote. F.A. Hayek. Tyranny and destruction await the civilization which has given control over itself to that which lacks the knowledge to control it, and yet does not know that it lacks such. Freedom and prosperity await the civilization which unleashes the knowledge and effort embedded in human action. And that was There's No Free Lunch. Thank you. And I was watching, this is about globalization and economic fascism. I'd always just said that our country has become fascist and that all the countries in the world have become fascist. But I like the term economic fascist or economically fascist better. I think it's a more accurate description. But anyways, that's what this is about, economic fascism. And on CNBC, a couple of talking heads were having a discussion about what is a business corporation to do? Should the corporation, refuse to do business, because they're also talking about the end of globalization. But should a business refuse to do business in a place that's committing, say, genocide? And then they went on to ask about doing business in China with the Uyghurs. Because genocide, then you would have, I suppose, it's supposed to be Russia and Ukraine or whatever. But when you get to China and the Uyghurs, then it's an interesting situation because there's a lot of companies, American companies, that are doing business in China, even though China is, according to the rumors, treating the Uyghurs at least very badly, maybe criminally. So what are they to do? The only reason that this is a question, and the whole question presumes economic fascism. What the questioner is asking is, what is the foreign policy of businesses? What should be the foreign policy of major corporations, say McDonald's? The problem is McDonald's doesn't set foreign policy. Foreign policy is set by the United States federal government. Federal government will decide what the foreign policy is going to be vis-a-vis China and the Uyghurs. Now, if the federal government wants to, it can perhaps it can ban, it can say, no American companies are going to do business in China. Get out now. Apple, get your F out of, get the F out of China, whatever. Okay. Or at least strongly, if that's not legal to do that, then at least strongly recommend that these businesses not do business in China. It is the responsibility of the federal government to conduct foreign policy. It is the responsibility of business to conduct business. What McDonald's should do is look at every place around the world as a business opportunity and assess whether or not they want to do business there from a business standpoint. Is this good for our customers? Is this good for our shareholders? And go from there. That's the reason why the question seems very difficult, very, well, I don't know. We've got people, it just seems more complicated, more difficult than it really is. The fact of the matter is it's a simple question. Business does what it does. Government does what it does. We get rid of economic fascism. We don't have corporations and the government working together to further American foreign policy or domestic policy for that matter. And then everything becomes very simple. Thank you. The questioning of the prospective Supreme Court justice that's going on right now, the hearings, nobody is asking more fundamental questions that is going to be much more difficult for any Supreme Court justice to sidestep or dodge. Right now, the questions that are being asked are easy, again, relatively easy to duck and dodge. The fundamental question here is as follows. If a tree in a forest falls and no one is around to hear it, did it make a sound? Now, usually you've heard this question maybe at parties and whatnot, and it's supposed to be sort of it's treated like a brain teaser, right? But what it really is a question about reality, about whether or not you as an individual acknowledge reality. The people on the left say that if a tree in a forest falls and no one is around to hear it, it did not make a noise. The rest of us, those that are realistic, those that of us that acknowledge reality, know that yes, it did make a noise. Okay. Now, with the Supreme Court justice, where does this go? Well, this is going to tell you everything you need to know in terms of the Supreme Court justices, whether it's this lady that's being interviewed right now or any other Supreme Court justice for that matter, how they're going to rule. If they're going to come out and say, well, no, it didn't make a noise, or we don't have proof that it made a noise, or blah, 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 then you know that they're going to go left. If they say, well, of course it made a noise, yes, it made a noise, then you know that they're going to be conservative. Thank you. I'm listening to the new Rush Limbaugh's, right? That show with the two guys, except one of them's gone. So they're from New York and all that. But anyways, so one guy's interviewing somebody and asking about workers that were laid off because they didn't want to get the vaccine or they didn't want to wear the masks or whatever the issue was, and wondering whether or not they should be hired back or even get some back pay. Now, my way of translating that is, should people that have been wronged get justice? And then I thought, well, absolutely, of course they should. But then that's when it flashed on me that there's two parts to the justice: that they should get what they have coming, whether it's getting their job back, because all the rest of this is basically, to me, detail. I don't care about the details. I don't care whether they're, they get their jobs back. That somebody else makes that decision. The first thing is, were they wrongfully terminated? If so, then they do deserve justice. Okay, but not only do they deserve to get their jobs back, perhaps, or some other type of remuneration or compensation, let's say, but part of justice is that the wrongdoers must be punished. Okay, remember that. Two parts to justice. Justice needs to satisfy the victim, and it also needs to punish the wicked. So whoever it is that fired these people should be punished in some way, shape, or form. Exactly what shape or form that would take, I don't know. And again, I don't care. I don't deal with the details. But remember that true conservative justice has those two parts. It punishes the wicked and it compensates the victims. Thank you. Let's see, neutral versus non-provocative. Next time you hear somebody that's saying neutral, that they are neutral, let's say Hugh Hewitt, what you need to do in your own mind is say what you mean non-provocative. Neutral is bullshit. I mean, there's no other way to put it. Nobody's neutral. Every human being on this planet is biased. Okay, literally. And so there is no neutrality. What they're really trying to say, or Hugh Hewitt, when he's saying he's neutral, is that he is not provocative. Because just because I'm biased, just because I'm a man, just because I'm an American, just because I am conservative, doesn't mean that I have to be provocative, that I have to say things and do things to provoke people. Okay, so the next time you hear somebody saying that they're neutral, it might be the news people. Well, we're news. No, you're non-provocative. Thank you. Promotion versus movements. William F. Buckley said that he was creating movement conservatism, which is impossible. Conservatism and movements are not compatible. They're repugnant. Movements are about collectives. You have to gather together a group or groups of people in order to create the movement. Promotion, on the other hand, is what he should have been talking about, what he should have said, promotion conservatism, where instead of being conservatives that just sit back and wait for things to happen, which is what it is that the reactionaries do, then conservatives can actually promote conservatism. So, and promotion can be done individually, because conservatism is respect for the individual, whereas collectivism says that the individual is insignificant and must be prepared to sacrifice himself or herself at any time in furtherance of the common good. So, again, to review,
William F. Buckley, when he was described as being a movement conservative, should have been described instead as a promotion conservative, because true conservatives can promote conservatism. It's fully in line with being a conservative.
Thank you. And now we're back to Shadowbosses, and we were left this off with the buckets. There's three different buckets that the unions use, buckets that money goes into, and so these are little discussions about where those buckets go. The first bucket goes to politics, and the second bucket, which is what we're going to read now, is to charitable giving. Into the smaller second bucket, the unions put money for gifts, contributions, and donations to other organizations. And this bucket, too, is largely political. Union donations go to support left-leaning think tanks, political movements, and other organizations. The goal is to build alliances with like-minded political groups, the vast left-wing conspiracy sometimes called the Shadow Democrat Party. To see how this works, let's look at America's largest union, the National Education Association, which represents teachers. As part of its huge political spending, the NEA's national headquarters alone made over $88 million in direct grants and donations to various organizations, almost all to left-leaning organizations and political organizing projects. The teachers' unions are able to draw attention away from their huge political influence because Americans generally like and trust teachers, because they represent people working with children. National Education Association and American Federation of Teachers benefit from residual goodwill in a way that the Teamsters and the United Auto Workers do not, one commentator noted. A typical NEA grant would be the $250,000 that the NEA gave to Arizona State University, which, like the NEA, is highly critical of charter schools. And just to ensure that NEA's agenda makes its way in the media, NEA has given $100,000 to Media Matters, the George Soros-funded liberal charitable organization dedicated to targeting mythical right-wing media bias, $110,000 to the Center for American Progress, another Soros-funded radical left think tank, and other grants to many more leftist organizations. Occupy Wall Street is among teachers' favorite causes. The New York City Teachers Union provided logistical support for the protesters. The union president said Occupy Wall Street isn't a place, it's an idea, a movement that has brought national and international focus to the danger to our economy that we face because of growing income inequality. Is income inequality an issue of direct importance to teachers? Of course not. But for future battles affecting the union more directly, the teachers' union needs to be part of the grand leftist alliance that OWS represents. While the teachers' unions are almost 100% liberal in their public positions and support for other organizations, a solid 50% of NEA's members consider themselves more conservative than liberal, according to NEA's own polling. But that doesn't stop NEA from continuing to pick its members' pockets to support a hard left agenda. So what rights do union members have to control donations by their unions to liberal causes? Practically speaking, none. Union members aren't given rights to vote against or opt out of political spending, although non-members paying agency fees do have the right to opt out of political spending. Until that changes, unions will continue to use philanthropy and resolutions to build a very strong coalition of leftist organizations that will support unions getting more power over our workers and our nation. Back in a minute. Thank you. Bucket number 3, worker representation. Almost forgot about it, didn't you? That's because representing their workers isn't as much of a core focus for government employee unions as political activity is. In this bucket, unions put funds for the actual cost of representing workers, negotiating contracts for them, handling grievances, and of course, organizing new groups of workers. You thought these causes were the central focus of unions. So did union members, but representing workers is not really a big part of the union's business plan. Because members and the public consider these to be core union activities, unions have an incentive to show as much possible spending on representational activities as possible. NEA shows about 13% of its national headquarters spending on representational activities, whereas the top 10 unions show the average of 30% of spending in this bucket at their national headquarters level. The difference may be that other unions like SEIU may spend considerably more than the NEA on organizing new workers, which also goes into this bucket for financial reporting purposes, but is really about business generation and improving the bottom line. It's likely that unions actually spend far less than 20% on real worker representation, especially at the state and national level, since negotiation and grievances are mostly handled at the local union level. How do we know that this bucket actually holds so little in practice? When members have sued to find out where their dues are going, unions have been able to show only that they spend about 20% of their dues income on these core union functions. An analysis of teachers' union dues in Washington state found that 20% or less of dues income were used for legitimate chargeable union functions, such as collective bargaining, maintenance of the contract, and grievances. So politics is the name of the game for the government employee unions. Negotiation over worker contracts, in many cases, is largely window dressing. Back in a minute. Thank you. Direct contributions. Unions don't generally make direct contributions to federal candidates or most state and local candidates out of their general revenues. If unions reported actual political contributions from union dues, they'd face negative tax consequences. Instead, unions set up special political action committees for the purpose of making campaign contributions to candidates. Union PACs cannot be funded from union dues, but are funded instead from contributions collected from the union's members. In contrast, super PACs can be funded with union dues, but cannot make campaign contributions to candidates and are used mostly for purchasing advertising and sending mailings in favor or against candidates. Member contributions to the union PACs are supposed to be voluntary and in addition to their union dues. In practice, however, unions frequently seem to extract these contributions from members without their consent. One recent FEC audit of a union showed that 93% of the time, the union was deducting PAC money from members without their written approval. In another case, the union was doing it 67% of the time. The moral of the story, don't ever give your union the right to deduct amounts from your paycheck if you have the choice. Of course, dues checkoff is mandatory for most union members. Direct donations to candidates through PACs are part of a union's political support for pro-union candidates, but the amounts aren't particularly large. Unions are estimated to spend 10 times as much on soft money political activities as on hard money campaign contributions to candidates. But this suits the candidates receiving the support just fine. Back in a minute. Thank you. Reward your friends, punish your enemies. The government employee unions have a very simple action plan. Reward your friends, slice and dice your enemies, Benihana style. Most Americans think that members of Congress and political leaders live in fear of the opinion of their constituents. But as we will see, Democrats live in fear of the people that really impact their re-election campaigns, the union Shadowbosses. And fear them they should, for hell hath no fury like a union official scorned. An honest politician, President Abraham Lincoln's Secretary of War Simon Cameron supposedly said, is one who, when he is bought, will stay bought. If the unions buy someone who doesn't stay bought, they work to replace him with someone who takes orders better. Of course, unions constantly try to replace Republicans with Democrats since, as a general rule, Democrats have less ideological objection to taking union orders. But they also replace Democrat defectors with more loyal Democrats. And if they don't support you, they're going to work against you, usually very effectively. AFL-CIO President Richard Trumka now spouts that unions are going to be even more vigilant about holding politicians accountable. For too long, we have been left after Election Day holding a canceled check, waving it about, Remember us, remember us, remember us, asking someone to pay a little attention to us. Well, I don't know about you, but I've had a snootful of that expletive deleted. He added, unlike in the past, instead of saying, okay, we've elected you, now do what's right by us, we are going to keep our machinery in place. The point he is making is that the unions will stay focused on politics all the time, not just at election time, in order to get better service from their politicians. Trumka asserted, we are going to make sure that our interests are considered at the front of the parade. Other unions echo the sentiment that they are keeping careful track of who is naughty and who is nice. Andy Stern, former head of the SEIU, told the Wall Street Journal in 2008 that he had set aside a $10 million fund just to get errant politicians unelected. And he said, we would like to make sure people appreciate that we take them at their word, and when they don't live up to their word, there should be consequences. Similarly, one California SEIU official exclaimed, we helped get you into office and we got a good memory. Come November, if you don't back our program, we'll get you out of office. And this is no empty threat. Of the top 10 congressional candidates whom labor spent money to defeat in 2008, all lost their races. Obama's first Secretary of Labor, Hilda Solis, knows all about the unions enforcing party discipline. This is exactly how she first got elected to the U.S. Congress. In 2000, she went to Congress as the labor union's choice in California against incumbent Democrat Matthew Martinez, who had defied the unions to support the North American Free Trade Agreement. Solis was seen as more controllable. As one of her colleagues in the California State House said about Solis and unions, she'll carry their water no matter what. And so the unions helped her replace Martinez. By contrast, when Democrats strayed from the beaten path on Obamacare in 2010, unions threatened to crunch them underfoot like fallen leaves in autumn. When Mike McMahon, Democrat House member from New York, was thinking of voting against Obamacare, a representative of the SEIU came to him and told him that the union would withdraw its support for his re-election. Representative McMahon didn't heed the union warning. He voted against Obamacare, and McMahon was defeated in his bid for re-election. And that is reward your friends and penalize your enemies. And next time we will have labor lapdogs.
Thank you, thank you. Who is the socialist? He is the man that is spiritual. He's the man that seeks consensus. He's subjective, petty, and small, taking everything in life personally. He's outrageous, boring, and rude. He pretends to be a leader and a change agent. He pretends that he's your friend. He is sly, cunning, and deceptive. He dresses, acts, and speaks like a slob. He is informal and terminally unique. He is childish and pretends that he knows nothing. He has no conscience and pretends that might makes right and that the ends justify the means. He is impulsive and rationalizes his behavior. He is deterministic, blaming others for his mistakes. He is skeptical, demanding that others solve his problems. His unreasonableness and irresponsibility make him a bad role model, bad father, brother, family member, friend, and a bad person, period. So if you think that you can be friends with a socialist, think again. Thank you, thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you to tune in to the John and Ken Show, which is an excellent example of how true conservatives communicate. It's a radio show that's on KFI AM 640 from 2 o'clock in the afternoon to 6 o'clock in the evening, Monday through Friday. And that's Pacific time. So that's an excellent show to listen to. And other than that, until next time, remember to be honest, to be smart, to be beautiful, and to remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.